Hi everyone, welcome to this Getting Started tutorial on the Syncfusion Angular TreeView. In this video, I will show you how to display a hierarchical list of items in a tree structure. You can load data on demand, select multiple items using checkboxes, edit nodes, and drag and drop items inside or outside the TreeView component. Now, let me show you the steps to create an Angular project using the Angular CLI tool, edit the code using Visual Studio Code, and finally, view the output on any of the supported browsers. First, you need to install the Angular CLI on your machine using this command, npm install -g at angular/CLI. As I have already installed Angular CLI on my machine, I am skipping this step. Next, to create a new Angular project, I use this command, ng new project name. I have named my project Angular TreeView. This will create an Angular project along with its dependencies. Now, let me navigate to the project folder. To use the Syncfusion Angular TreeView, I need to install the Syncfusion Angular Navigations package using this command, npm install at syncfusion/ej2 Angular Navigations --save. This will install the Angular Navigations package along with its dependencies. Now, I am going to open this application in Visual Studio Code. Navigate to the app module file and import the TreeView module from the Syncfusion ej2 Angular Navigations package. Register it within the imports array of the ng module section. Next, open the main TS file and import the register license method from the Syncfusion ej2 base package. Then, register the Syncfusion Angular trial license key using the register license method. Syncfusion Angular license key registration is required from the 2022 Volume 1 release onwards. Now, I will change the app component HTML file by replacing its default content with the Angular TreeView code. Next, I will populate the TreeView with data. First, I will open the app component TS file, create an object named TreeViewData, and assign an array of objects with fields, ID and name. Here, I have defined the ID field to set a unique ID for the node, and the name field to display the TreeView node's text. Then, I define a dataSource fields variable, and assign the TreeView data object to the dataSource property. For this dataSource, the appropriate dataSource field should be mapped. So, define the properties ID and text, and then map the fields, ID and name, respectively. Now, I will assign this dataSource fields variable to the fields property of the Angular TreeView component. Along with this, CSS for TreeView should also be defined, so I import the material theme in the style.css file. I will save this application and run it using the command ngserve. Now, as you can see, the TreeView component shows the items. Next, I will show how to add subnodes to the main nodes. To do that, within this TreeView data variable, let me add one more field subchild, and define the fields, ID and name with appropriate values. Here, this ID field sets a unique ID for the subnode, and name provides the TreeView subnode's text to display. Then, I will assign this subchild field to the child property of the TreeView fields. Look at the output page now. When expanding the node, the corresponding subnodes are also displayed. Suppose I want to add subnodes for these program files, users, and windows. Then, I will define another field subchild and assign an array of objects with the fields, ID and name with appropriate values. As I said before, this ID field sets a unique ID for the subnode, and name sets the text to display in it. Looking at the TreeView component now, the program files, users, and Windows subnodes are displayed while expanding the nodes. Notice here, the nodes are collapsed initially. Suppose I want to expand them, then I need to set the expanded field to true. Here, I am going to expand the local disk C item and its subitems, so I have defined the expanded field for these nodes. Looking at the TreeView component now, the subnodes of the first node are expanded initially. So far, we have seen how to bind hierarchical data as local JSON data to the TreeView component. Now, I will show you how to bind data from a remote data source that contains self-referential data. Let's have a look at this self-referential example data first, to understand its structure. In addition to the usual ID and text fields, you will see objects with two additional fields, parent ID and hasChildren. This hasChildren field indicates whether a node has child nodes or not. The parent ID field maps the appropriate parent node to its child node. Notice here, these three objects have an additional field, parent ID with the value 1, which indicates that they render as child nodes. As I am going to bind the remote data source to the component that returns self-referential data, I need to map both the parent ID and hasChildren fields appropriately. To bind the remote data, I am going to use Syncfusion's Data Manager library. This data manager acts as a gateway between the TreeView component and data source and uses queries to interact with both local and remote data sources. As a first step, I import the data manager and the required adapter from the Syncfusion EJ2 data package. Then, I define the data manager with properties like URL, adapter, and cross-domain. In the URL, I will assign an already available remote service URL, which will retrieve the collection of data tables through the post method. I am going to fetch data from these two entities, employees and orders, and bind them to Angular TreeView. Also, I have set OData v4 adapter here, as the URL is assigned to an existing OData service. The cross-domain option is set to true, to allow the cross-origin domain request. Then, I write individual queries to fetch data for both parent and child nodes. First, I define a variable, data query of type query for the parent node. I fetch the employee ID, first name, and title fields from the employee table, and map it to the parent data source. I also import this query class from the Syncfusion data package to access it. Like the parent data, I need to write a query for the child node as well. So, I retrieve the fields order ID, ship name, and employee ID from orders table, and map it to the child data source. Next, I map the remote data source fields to the appropriate field properties by defining an object named remote data fields and assigning the remote data source object to the data source property, and map the field's employee ID to the ID property and first name to the text property. Then, I define hasChildren with the value employee ID field to identify whether the nodes have child items or not. If the hasChildren field contains a value, then that particular object is identified as a parent node. Next, to map the child node fields, I add the child property and assign the data source to the data source property, order ID field from orders table to the ID property, and ship name field to the text property. As already seen, the parent node data is retrieved from the employee table. To identify the parent to whom the child nodes belong, I define the parent ID property for the child node data source and map it to the employee ID field. I also assign these query variables to the query property of the TreeView fields. And finally, I set this remote data source field to the field's property. In the output now, the TreeView component displays the employee names as parent node items, and its respective ship names as their sub-items. Notice here, I can select only one item. To select multiple items, define the Allow Multi-Selection property with the value true inside this TreeView code. Looking at the TreeView component now, I can select multiple items. Next, I will show you how to enable checkboxes for these items and their sub-items. All I have to do is define the Show Checkbox property and set its value to true. Now, you can see the TreeView nodes displayed with checkboxes. Here, I can check the main node's boxes to select their sub-nodes. Next, to make the nodes editable, I need to define an Allow Editing property with the value true inside the TreeView code. Here, I plan to bind local JSON data source to the TreeView component for the purpose of editing, so let me assign the TreeView data object to it. Look at the output page now. You can edit the nodes by double-clicking on them. Finally, I will show you how to drag and drop items in the TreeView component. To drag and drop items, define an Allow Drag and Drop property and set its value to true. Now, I can drag and drop items and their sub-items like this. Let me summarize what we accomplished in this video. We have seen how to add the Syncfusion Angular TreeView to an Angular application, and how to bind local and remote data sources to it. We then saw how to enable checkboxes and edit nodes, and finally, how to drag and drop a node and select multiple nodes at a time. If you would like to see a working example, you can download one from the GitHub link shared in the description below. I have also included a link in the description where you can check if you qualify for our community license, which gives you a free license key for our entire Angular suite. If you found this video useful, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.